The night. I realized I was never family, just convenient. I was 29 the night my name disappeared from my own family's future. It happened quietly the way real betrayals usually do. No shouting, no slammed doors, just a sentence dropped into conversation like it had always been there waiting for me to notice. We were sitting in my mother's house in Cedar Falls, Iowa, the same narrow dining room where every holiday since my childhood had taken place. Thanksgiving leftovers were still on the counter. The air smelled like reheated gravy, and pine-scented cleaner. My mother liked things to feel reset before Christmas, as if wiping surfaces could erase tension. My younger brother Nathan was talking about his upcoming wedding. He spoke fast, excited, already stressed. My mother, Elaine Mercer, nodded along, interrupting every few sentences to offer opinions disguised as help. Colors, guest lists, seating charts. She always loved weddings. Not for romance, but for control. I sat at the end of the table nursing a glass of water, listening more than speaking. I had learned that skill early. In my family, talking too much only gave people more material to twist later. Nathan leaned back and said casually, "Of course the house situation is handled. Mom already talked to the lawyer about transferring things." I looked up, transferring what things? The room shifted. Not silent exactly, but thinner, like the air had been pulled tight. My mother didn't look at me. She kept stacking plates, aligning the edges with precision. "The property," she said. "It just makes sense to keep it simple." Nathan shrugged, uncomfortable now. "It's just easier this way." I waited. No one filled in the blank. Easier for who I asked. My mother finally turned. Her smile was small, practiced. The smile she used when she had already decided something and didn't want to explain it for the family. That word, family, it always landed differently on me. I had lived on my own since I was 22, paid my own rent, built a quiet life in Des Moines, working as a compliance analyst for a regional bank. I didn't ask for help. I didn't borrow. I showed up to birthdays, sent gifts, covered gaps without announcing it. When my mother's roof needed repairs one winter, I wired the money before she finished asking. When Nathan lost his job 2 years ago, I paid his car note for 3 months and told him it was nothing. Apparently it was something. "What lawyer?" I asked. My mother waved a hand, dismissive. "Someone recommended by church. It's nothing finalized." Nathan avoided my eyes. Something inside me went cold. Not angry, not hurt yet, just alert. "You're transferring the house," I said slowly to Nathan. My mother sighed like I was being difficult on purpose. "He's starting a family, Claire. He needs stability. You're independent." Independent. That was the word she used when she wanted to explain why I didn't get things. I looked around the table. At my aunt sipping wine like this was a television show. At Nathan's fiancée, Melissa, staring into her phone. No one spoke. No one protested. Silence unanimous. "So I'm not part of that conversation," I said. My mother frowned. "Don't make this dramatic." I smiled. It surprised even me. "I'm not. I just want clarity." Nathan cleared his throat. "You don't even live here. And yet I said I helped pay the property taxes last year." My mother's eyes flashed. "That was your choice." There it was. The script. Every sacrifice I made had always been framed as voluntary, conveniently forgotten when decisions were made. I nodded. "Okay." I stood, picked up my coat, and reached for my purse. Elaine blinked. "Where are you going?" "Home," I said. "I've heard enough." She opened her mouth, probably to say something about timing or attitude or how tired she was, but I was already walking toward the door. In the car, my hands shook as I started the engine, not from rage, from recognition. This wasn't new. This was just the first time it had been said out loud. All the years of being the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who didn't need anything. I had mistaken tolerance for love. I had confused usefulness with belonging. On the drive back to Des Moines, my phone buzzed twice. I didn't look. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, I understood something I had never allowed myself to say before. I wasn't being pushed aside. I had never been standing in the center to begin with. That night, I opened my laptop and searched for something I had avoided for years. A state attorney consultation near me. I didn't know yet what I was going to do. I just knew I was done being surprised. And somewhere between the glow of the screen and the quiet hum of my refrigerator, I felt the first shift. Not revenge. Preparation, the shape of the silence. The next morning, my phone was full. 6 missed calls from my mother, 2 from Nathan, 1 voicemail from my aunt that I deleted without listening. No messages from Melissa. She had never contacted me directly before and wasn't about to start now. I showered, dressed, and went to work as if nothing had happened. That wasn't denial. It was muscle memory. When you grow up learning that emotional reactions will be used against you later, you get very good at postponing them. At my desk, I pulled up spreadsheets and risk reports, my mind slipping into the familiar logic of numbers. Compliance work has a way of stripping emotion out of decisions. Either something aligns with policy or it doesn't. Either the documentation exists or it doesn't. I liked that clarity. It was the opposite of my family. By mid-morning, my mother's name flashed across my screen again. I let it ring. 10 minutes later, a text came through. "You walked out last night. That was hurtful. No question, no curiosity, just an accusation framed as disappointment." I stared at it, then turned my phone face down. At lunch, I sat alone in my car with a turkey sandwich and watched people come and go from the office building across the street. A woman my mother's age laughed as she balanced a coffee and a stack of papers. Somewhere, someone else's family drama was unfolding. The world didn't pause for mine. I thought about the house. The one on Willow Ridge Road. The one my parents bought when I was 9. I remembered the cracked tile near the entryway, the loose stair rail my father promised to fix, and never did. After he died, my mother treated the house like a symbol of survival. She talked about it the way people talk about lifeboats. What she didn't talk about was the equity, or the fact that I had contributed to it. I had never expected anything in return. But I had assumed honesty, inclusion, at least a conversation. That assumption was gone now. That afternoon, I called the estate attorney whose name I had bookmarked the night before. Her assistant scheduled a consultation for the following week. It felt surreal, like preparing for a storm no one else believed was coming. When I got home, there was a voicemail waiting. This one I listened to. "Claire," my mother said, her voice tight. "I don't understand why you're being so distant. You know how much pressure Nathan is under. This is not the time to make things about yourself." I laughed, a short sound that surprised me with its bitterness. That had always been the line. There was never a time. I didn't call her back. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements. I traced the transfers, property tax, emergency repairs, insurance deductibles. It wasn't a staggering amount all at once. It never was. That was the trick. A few hundred here, a few thousand there. Over the years, it added up to something substantial. More than that, it added up to expectation. I saved the files into a folder and labeled it simply House. The next call came from Nathan that evening. I answered this one more out of curiosity than obligation. "What's going on with you?" he asked without greeting. I leaned against my kitchen counter. "What do you mean?" "You embarrassed Mom. You made it sound like she was doing something behind your back." "She was," I said calmly. He exhaled sharply. "You're overreacting. It's just paperwork. Nothing's even finalized." "Then why wasn't I included?" There was a pause. I could hear traffic through the phone. He was probably pacing the way he did when he wanted to sound reasonable. "Because you don't need the house," he said. "You're doing fine." There it was again. Fine. The most expensive word in my family. "I helped pay for it," I said. "That was your choice," he replied quickly, echoing our mother. I closed my eyes. "Nathan, did you know she was planning this?" Another pause, longer this time. "She mentioned it," he said. "I didn't think it was a big deal." I felt something settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, resolution. "Okay," I said. "That's it?" he asked, confused. "That's it." He waited for more. An argument, tears, negotiation. I gave him none. After we hung up, I sat on the couch in the quiet and thought about how small the moment had been. No shouting, no threats. Just a truth laid bare. They had already decided who mattered more. Over the next few days, the pattern repeated. Calls, messages, carefully worded concern that always looped back to how my reaction was the real problem. No one asked if I felt excluded. No one asked why I was hurt. The silence from Melissa became louder than any accusation. She posted engagement updates online, venue tours, dress fittings. My absence was noticeable, but no one addressed it. I watched from a distance, feeling like a guest who had overstayed. On Thursday evening, my aunt showed up at my door unannounced. She stood awkwardly on the threshold, clutching her purse. "Your mother asked me to check on you." I stepped aside and let her in. We sat at my small kitchen table. She didn't waste time. "She's very upset," my aunt said. "I know. She doesn't understand why you're making this difficult." I looked at her. "Do you understand?" My aunt hesitated. Then she sighed. "I think your mother assumes you'll be fine with it. You always are." That sentence landed heavier than anything else that week. I'm not fine with it, I said. I figured, she replied quietly. When she left, the apartment felt steadier, like something had been set straight. That night I made a list, not emotional, practical. What I had contributed, what I had never been told, what I needed to know. At the top I wrote a question I had avoided for too long. What else don't I know? I didn't have the answer yet. But for the first time, I was willing to look for it. What paper knows that people don't? By the time my consultation day arrived, the anger had cooled into something more useful. Focus. I took the afternoon off work and drove to the attorney's office just after lunch. The building was a modest brick structure tucked between a dental clinic and a financial planning firm. No marble lobby, no intimidation, just quiet competence. That alone made me breathe easier. Her name was Marjorie Feldman. Late 50s, gray hair, pulled back glasses hanging from a chain. She shook my hand firmly and didn't waste time on pleasantries. Tell me what you know, she said, clicking a pen. So I did. I kept it factual. Dates, contributions, conversations, who said what, and more importantly, who didn't. She listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back. Do you have documentation? Yes, I said, sliding the folder across the desk. She flipped through it carefully. Bank transfers, tax receipts, email confirmations. Not emotional proof, but solid. This is helpful, she said, but it doesn't automatically grant you ownership. I know, I replied. I'm not here to force my way into something. She studied me. Then what are you here for? I thought about it. The honest answer surprised me. I want to stop being invisible, I said, and I want to make sure nothing else is happening without my knowledge. Marjorie nodded slowly. That's reasonable. She explained the basics. If my mother was transferring assets solely into my brother's name while excluding me, it wasn't illegal. Unfair maybe, but not illegal. Unless there are other assets involved, she said, or misrepresentation. I felt a tightening in my chest. Like what? Life insurance policies, trusts, accounts with named beneficiaries. My stomach dropped just slightly. Not because I knew something, because I didn't. My father died 8 years ago, I said. Everything was handled. Marjorie raised an eyebrow. Handled how? My mother took care of it. She didn't comment on that. She simply nodded and said, if you want clarity, you can request a full accounting. Not from your mother, from the institutions involved. How? She slid a card across the desk. I'll draft the letters. You sign them. We'll see what comes back. That was it. No confrontation, no accusations, just paper asking paper questions. I signed. On the drive home, I felt a strange mix of dread and relief. Like opening a door you suspect hides something ugly, but knowing it's worse to leave it closed. 3 days later, the first envelope arrived. It was from a life insurance company I didn't recognize. I sat at my kitchen table and opened it carefully, like it might cut me. The letter was formal, polite, precise. It referenced a policy taken out by my father 12 years before his death. Term life. Beneficiaries listed as Elaine Mercer and Claire Mercer, equal shares. Equal. My breath caught. The payout amount was listed in words. Not small, not enormous, enough to matter. The letter ended with a line that made my hands go cold. Policy paid in full to primary beneficiary. Funds disbursed 6 months after policyholder's death. I read it twice, then again. Primary beneficiary. I was listed, but I wasn't paid. That night I didn't call anyone. I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I sat very still and let the truth take shape. This wasn't favoritism. This was theft. The next envelope came the following week, then another. A savings bond account, a small investment fund my father had set up through work. Both listed beneficiaries, both disbursed. Only one name on the checks. Elaine Mercer. I met with Marjorie again. I laid the letters out on her desk without saying a word. She read them slowly, her mouth tightening with each page. This changes things, she said. How? These funds were not marital assets. They were designated. Beneficiary designations override wills. If your mother diverted them, that's a problem. A legal one, I said. Yes. I felt something steady settle in my spine, not excitement, gravity. What do we do? I asked. We request records, then we ask for an explanation. And if she lies, Marjorie's voice was calm, then we escalate. That evening, my mother called again. I watched her name light up my phone and let it ring. A message followed. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this distance is hurting everyone. I stared at it, then typed a response I had never sent before. I'm reviewing some financial records. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk. She replied almost immediately. What records? I didn't answer. 2 days later, Nathan texted. Mom says you hired a lawyer. I closed my eyes. Yes, I typed, to understand things. There was a long pause. Then this is getting out of hand. I didn't respond. Because for the first time in my life, the situation wasn't out of hand. It was finally in mine. That night, I opened a new folder on my laptop. I named it simply Truth. I didn't know yet how this would end. I didn't know who would deny, deflect, or explode. But I knew one thing with certainty. Whatever my family thought love was supposed to look like, it had never included honesty. And I was done pretending that was normal. The first lie is always the quietest. The letter went out on a Monday. Marjorie had drafted it in clean, neutral language. No accusations, no emotion. Just a formal request for documentation related to specific accounts, policies, and distributions tied to my father's estate. I signed it without hesitation. It was addressed to my mother. I didn't tell her it was coming. By Wednesday night, my phone rang. I was cooking pasta, the kind that requires almost no attention. My apartment smelled like garlic and olive oil. Ordinary, grounded. Elaine Mercer's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "What is this?" she demanded, skipping any greeting. I turned the stove down and leaned against the counter. "What is what?" "The letter," she said sharply. "Why am I getting legal mail from your lawyer?" "My lawyer," I repeated calmly. "Yes," she snapped. "Why do you have a lawyer involved in family matters?" I waited a beat, because I have questions. "You could have asked me," she said. "I did," I replied. "For years, I just didn't know which ones to ask." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. I imagined her pacing the living room, one hand on her hip, the other gripping the phone like it was misbehaving. "You are blowing this completely out of proportion," she said. "Everything I did was for the family." I didn't argue that. I asked something simpler. Why was I listed as the beneficiary and never paid? Silence. Not the kind where someone is thinking. The kind where someone is recalculating. "That money was needed," she said finally. "You were young. You didn't need it." "It wasn't yours to decide that," I said. Her voice sharpened. "I was your father's wife, and I was his daughter." She laughed, once a brittle sound. "You have no idea what I went through after he died. I had to hold everything together." "I understand grief," I said. "I don't understand secrecy." She shifted tactics. "You would have wasted it." I felt something flicker, not anger, recognition. This was the story she told herself, that she was protecting me from myself. That control was care. "How do you know?" I asked. "I'm your mother," she said. "I know you." "No," I said quietly. "You know the version of me that makes your life easier." She went quiet again. "You're accusing me of stealing from you," she said. "I'm asking for documentation," I corrected. "The facts will speak for themselves." Her tone changed then, softer, wounded. "After everything I've done for you." There it was, the emotional invoice. I didn't respond. "Your brother is devastated," she continued. "This stress is affecting the wedding. People are starting to ask questions." "That's unfortunate," I said, "but not my responsibility." Her voice rose. "You're tearing this family apart." I pictured the house on Willow Ridge Road, the walls I had helped maintain, the secrets tucked into its drawers. "I didn't tear anything apart," I said. "I just stopped holding it together." She hung up on me. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next day, Nathan showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. He looked tired, older. "We need to talk," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. He paced while I sat. He always paced, like motion could substitute for clarity. "Mom's a mess," he said. "She's barely sleeping." I waited. "She says you're threatening her, that you're trying to take things from her." "I'm asking for what was already mine," I said. He stopped pacing and looked at me. "Is that really how you see it?" "Yes." He shook his head. "You don't need that money." I stood up then, not aggressively, just enough to meet his eye. "This isn't about need," I said. "It's about truth." He scoffed. "This is about resentment. You've always felt overlooked." I nodded, "And now I have proof." That landed harder than I expected. His shoulders slumped slightly. "What do you want, Claire?" I considered the question. "I want honesty," I said. "And I want the house transfer paused until everything is clear." He stared at me. "You can't do that." "I can request it," I said. "And I have." His eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I filed a notice of interest," I said, "based on my financial contributions and unresolved beneficiary claims." The words sounded strange even to me. Legal, solid. "You went behind our backs," he said. I smiled faintly. "Now you know how it feels." He left without saying goodbye. 2 weeks passed. The responses from the institutions arrived slowly, one by one. Each confirmed the same thing. The funds had been disbursed solely to my mother. No secondary payments, no trusts, No explanations. Marjorie reviewed everything and made a decision. We file a claim, she said, not publicly, quietly. What about the wedding, I asked. She raised an eyebrow. What about it? I thought of Nathan's guest list, the seating chart, the house meant to be their first home. Nothing, I said. You're right. The claim was filed on a Friday. On Sunday, my mother showed up at my door. She didn't knock. She rang the bell and held it. I opened the door to find her standing there, eyes red, lips pressed tight. She looked smaller than I remembered. I raised you better than this, she said. I stepped back and let her in. She looked around my apartment like she was taking inventory. The new couch, the art on the walls, evidence. You think you're smarter than me, she said. You think a lawyer makes you powerful. I met her gaze. No, facts do. Her face crumpled, not with remorse, with fear. You don't understand what you're doing, she said. If this comes out, I know exactly what I'm doing, I replied. I'm choosing not to disappear. She left an hour later, defeated but not apologetic. That was when I understood something crucial. The first lie is always the quietest, and once you hear it, you can never unhear it again. Where loyalty ends and leverage begins. After my mother left that night, the apartment didn't feel invaded the way it usually did after her visits. It felt scrubbed clean, like something stale had finally been aired out. I washed the mug she'd used, dried it, and put it back in the cabinet. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop, not to check messages, not to reread documents, but to do something small and grounding. I paid my electric bill early. I scheduled a plumber for the slow leak under the sink. Ordinary acts, proof that my life still belonged to me. By Monday morning, the tone shifted. Up until then, my family's reaction had followed a familiar rhythm: guilt, outrage, denial. But once the claim was officially filed, a new note crept in: urgency. My mother didn't call. Instead, she sent a message that was almost polite. We should sit down with Marjorie together. Clear this up like adults. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The invitation wasn't about clarity. It was about containment. If she could pull this back into a room where she felt in control, she believed she could still shape the outcome. I forwarded the message to Marjorie without comment. Her reply came an hour later. If she wants to talk, it will be through me. That afternoon, Nathan emailed me. Not texted. Emailed. As if formality could put distance between him and what he was about to say. Claire, I don't know what Mom told you, but you're putting everyone in an impossible position. There are consequences you might not be seeing yet. I read it twice. Consequences. Not justice, not truth, consequences. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to work and sat through meetings about regulatory timelines and internal audits. I listened to colleagues argue over wording that might someday matter in court. I watched people choose precision over comfort. It struck me then that I trusted strangers at work more than I trusted my own family. On Wednesday, my aunt called. She didn't start with concern. She started with a warning. Your mother is telling people you're unstable, she said. I closed my eyes. How? She's saying the stress of being alone all these years has made you paranoid. That you're lashing out because you're jealous of Nathan. Jealous? Another familiar label. One that let them ignore everything else. Who's she telling this to, I asked. Anyone who'll listen, my aunt said. Church friends, cousins, people who don't know the details. I felt the old instinct rise up, the urge to explain, to correct the narrative before it hardened. Then I let it pass. Thank you for telling me, I said. That's it, she asked. That's it. The next escalation came quietly wrapped in faux concern. My mother contacted my employer. Not directly. She called the main line and asked to be transferred to human resources. She introduced herself as a worried parent and implied she was concerned about my mental state given some recent family stress. HR called me into a meeting the next day. It was uncomfortable but brief. My performance reviews spoke for themselves. My manager knew me. Still, the fact that my mother had tried to reach into that part of my life told me something important. This wasn't about reconciliation anymore. This was about leverage. That evening, Marjorie called me personally. She's nervous, she said. That's good for us, but it also means she may get reckless. Like what? Like moving assets, or pressuring your brother to accelerate the house transfer. My chest tightened. Can she do that? Not easily, Marjorie said. Not now. I thought about Nathan, about his wedding plans, about how much he wanted things to stay smooth. She's going to push him, I said. Yes, Marjorie replied, and that's where things may fracture. 2 days later, Nathan confirmed it. He showed up again, this time without anger, just exhaustion. She wants me to sign, he said. What I asked. She wants me to finalize the house transfer now, before anything else happens. And I said, He rubbed his face with both hands. I don't know what to do. I studied him, really looked. For the first time I saw fear there, not just entitlement. If you sign, I said, you tie yourself to this, legally. She says it's just a precaution. She also said I didn't need to know about the money, I replied. He flinched. Did you know, I asked. He shook his head. Not until recently. When I pressed. After your lawyer sent the letter, he admitted. She told me there had been insurance money, that it was complicated. Complicated how? She said it would have been wasted if you'd had access to it. I nodded slowly, and you believed her. He didn't answer. I'm not asking you to choose sides, I said. I'm telling you the truth. If you sign that transfer now, you become part of the problem. His jaw tightened. You're asking me to risk my future. I held his gaze. I already did, for years. The silence stretched between us. I need time, he said finally. That's fair, I replied. He left, looking smaller than before. That weekend, my mother sent a group message to the extended family. It was long, emotional, carefully worded. She talked about betrayal, about ungrateful children, about how painful it is when someone turns legal over love. She never mentioned amounts, never mentioned policies. She framed everything as confusion and heartbreak. A few relatives responded with sympathy, others stayed silent. One message came privately from a cousin I barely spoke to. I don't know what's really going on, but I hope you're okay. I replied with a single sentence. I'm finally being honest. By Sunday night, I realized something crucial. The pressure wasn't going to stop. Not until there was a clear shift in power. I emailed Marjorie and asked a question I had been holding back. What's the next step? Her reply was brief. Discovery. I leaned back in my chair and let the words settle. This was no longer about confronting my mother. It was about letting the truth stand on its own in a place where stories didn't matter, where loyalty couldn't overwrite records, where control had limits. And for the first time, I understood why she was so afraid. Because once leverage is gone, all that's left is accountability. Discovery has a way of remembering everything. Discovery didn't arrive with drama, it arrived with envelopes. Thick ones, stiff paper, return addresses that didn't care about family dynamics or tone. They asked for records, timelines, explanations. They asked for dates and signatures and the kind of details that can't be smoothed over by saying you did your best. Marjorie walked me through it in her office, her voice steady, procedural. We're not accusing, she said. We're asking. And the asking itself creates obligation. What if she ignores it, I asked. She can't, Marjorie said. Not without consequences. The word consequences came back again, but this time it wasn't a threat. It was a framework. By the end of the week, my mother had hired her own attorney. I learned that from Nathan, who called late one night, his voice low, like he didn't want anyone else in the room to hear. She's furious, he said. She says you're humiliating her. I pictured my mother sitting at her dining table, the same one from Thanksgiving, papers spread out where casseroles used to be. I felt no satisfaction, just distance. She doesn't have to be humiliated, I said. She just has to be honest. Nathan sighed. You don't know what she's like when she feels cornered. I do, I said. I just don't live there anymore. There was a pause. Then quietly, she's blaming you for the stress. I almost smiled. That's familiar. After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room and thought about how stress had always been assigned in my family. It flowed downward, never up. From my mother to me. From me to no one. That week, something unexpected happened. My sister-in-law, Melissa, texted me. It was the first direct message I had ever received from her that wasn't about logistics or polite holidays. Can we talk? I hesitated, then I replied. Sure. We met for coffee near her office. She arrived late, eyes tired, phone in hand like a lifeline. I didn't want to get involved, she said, not meeting my eyes. But this is affecting everything. I know, I replied. She says you're trying to take the house away from us. I'm trying to stop it from being transferred until things are resolved, I said. That's not the same thing. Melissa nodded slowly. She didn't explain it that way. Of course she didn't. Did you know about the insurance money, I asked? Melissa looked startled. What insurance money? I watched the realization settle over her face. The way confusion turned into something sharper. She told me there wasn't anything, she said. That the house was all there was. I sipped my coffee. That's not accurate. We sat in silence for a moment, then she exhaled. This changes things, she said. Yes, I agreed. When she left, she hugged me. It was awkward, brief, but it was real. That was when I understood the ripple effect. Truth doesn't just confront one person. It destabilizes entire narratives. 2 days later, my mother's attorney sent a response. It was defensive, vague, heavy on emotion, light on facts. They acknowledged the policies but framed the distributions as necessary for household expenses after my father's death. They argued implied consent. They suggested I had benefited indirectly. Marjorie read it, then looked up at me. They're building a story. Can they prove it? I asked. She shook her head. Not yet. Then what? Then we asked better questions. Depositions were scheduled. My name was listed, my mother's, Nathan's. When I told Nathan, he went quiet. I don't want to be in the middle of this, he said. You already are, I replied gently. You always have been. The day of my deposition, I wore a navy blazer and flats. Nothing dramatic, nothing soft. I wanted to look like myself. They asked me about my relationship with my parents, about money, about expectations, about whether I had ever been promised anything. No, I said. I was never promised, I was assumed. They asked if I resented my brother. No, I said. I resented being erased. They asked if I was doing this for revenge. I paused. I'm doing this for accuracy. My mother's deposition was scheduled for the following week. She didn't speak to me in the interim. No calls, no messages. The silence felt different now, less manipulative, more strategic. Nathan called the night before her deposition. She's scared, he said. I know, I replied. She says she did everything for us. I believe she believes that, I said. He hesitated. If she loses this, it won't just be money. I looked out my window at the city lights. I didn't create that risk. He was quiet for a long time. I don't know who she is anymore, he said. I closed my eyes, neither did I, until now. After we hung up, I realized something else had changed. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't waiting for understanding. I was waiting for resolution. The day of my mother's deposition, Marjorie called me afterward. She contradicted herself, she said, more than once. About what? Timelines, amounts, intent. I felt my shoulders drop, tension releasing I hadn't realized I was holding. This is moving, Marjorie continued. Slowly, but it's moving. That night I went for a walk alone. The air was cool, the streets quiet. I passed couples, families, people living inside versions of stories I would never see. I didn't feel lonely. I felt unburdened. Discovery doesn't shout, it doesn't accuse, it remembers. And the more it remembered, the less room there was for my mother's version of love to stand. The cost of pretending nothing happened. The first crack didn't come from the court. It came from Christmas. My mother had always treated holidays like leverage. Invitations were currency. Seating arrangements were statements. Who was welcomed, who was tolerated, who was quietly punished. I had learned that early. This year, the invitation came late. A single text sent 3 weeks before Christmas. I hope you'll reconsider everything and come home. Family should be together right now. No apology, no acknowledgement of what was unfolding. Just the familiar expectation that I would step back into my role for the sake of appearances. I didn't respond. 2 days later, Nathan called. She's telling everyone you're refusing to come, he said. I didn't refuse, I replied. I wasn't invited until now. He sighed. You know what she means. Yes, I said, and that's why I'm not going. There was a pause. Then Melissa and I are still coming. I figured, I said. She's uncomfortable, he added, with everything. That makes 2 of us, I said. What I didn't say was that discomfort was finally being shared. For years, it had belonged to me alone. On Christmas morning, I stayed in Des Moines. I made coffee. I watched the city wake up through my living room window. No rushing, no performance, just quiet. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A photo from my aunt, the dining table, the same one, everyone seated, my chair missing. The caption read, "It's strange without you." I stared at the image longer than I expected, not because I missed the table, but because I saw it clearly now. A stage set to tell one story with no room for dissent. That afternoon, Marjorie emailed me an update. Your mother's attorney is pushing for mediation. I read it twice. Mediation was what people suggested when they wanted things to look resolved without actually being addressed. I called her. What does that mean? I asked. It means they're worried, she said. Mediation gives them a chance to control the narrative. Do we have to agree? I asked. No, she replied. But attending doesn't weaken our position. I thought about my mother sitting across from me, practiced sadness in her eyes, ready to frame everything as a misunderstanding. I'll attend, I said, but I won't negotiate facts. That's exactly right, Marjorie said. The mediation was scheduled for mid-January. In the meantime, the fallout spread. Melissa stopped responding to my messages altogether. Nathan became harder to reach. Mutual acquaintances went quiet. Invitations stopped coming. This was the other cost of truth no one warns you about. Not punishment. Withdrawal. People didn't argue with me. They simply adjusted their lives so I wasn't part of them anymore. It was subtle, polite, clean, and deeply revealing. One evening, I ran into a neighbor in the hallway, an older woman who had lived in the building longer than I had. "Haven't seen you visiting home much lately," she said casually. I smiled. "I've been busy." She nodded. "Sometimes busy is safer." I didn't ask how she knew. The week before mediation, Nathan showed up again. This time he didn't pace. He sat. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly. "Do what?" "Be in the middle without losing someone." I studied him. He looked like someone who had spent his whole life being buffered from consequences and had finally reached the edge of that protection. "You don't have to be in the middle," I said. "You just have to be honest." "With who?" "With yourself," I replied. "Everyone else will adjust." He rubbed his hands together. "She's asking me to say certain things." I nodded. "She did that with me too." He looked up sharply. "Like what?" "That I was fine, that I didn't need things, that it was better this way." He swallowed. "She told me to say you were always independent." I almost laughed. That word has cost me more than anything else I said. He stared at the floor. "I didn't know about the money until recently. And when I found out, I didn't say anything." "That's a choice," I said gently. "I know," he whispered. For the first time, I saw something shift in him. Not allegiance, awareness. The mediation took place in a neutral office downtown. Long table, water pitchers, boxes of tissues no one touched. My mother arrived dressed carefully. Soft colors, minimal jewelry. She looked smaller, older, vulnerable by design. She didn't look at me at first. When she did, her eyes filled immediately. "I never wanted this," she said, voice trembling. I waited. "I did everything to keep this family afloat," she continued. "And now I'm being punished for it." I glanced at the mediator, then at Marjorie, then back at my mother. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm correcting a record." Her mouth tightened. "You're tearing us apart." I leaned forward slightly. "No." I stopped pretending we weren't already. The mediator shifted uncomfortably. My mother reached for a tissue she didn't need. "I just want us to move on." "Then stop rewriting the past," I said, "and start acknowledging it." She shook her head. "You don't understand how hard it was." "I understand exactly how hard it was," I said, "because you handed it to me." That landed. Her attorney intervened, suggested compromise, partial repayment, a quiet settlement. Marjorie spoke then, calm, precise. "We're not here to bargain feelings," she said. "We're here to address facts." The session ended without resolution, but something else ended too. The illusion that my mother could cry her way out of accountability. When I left the building, the winter air cut sharp and clean. I breathed deeply like someone surfacing. For years, I had been told that standing my ground would cost me everything. What no one said was that pretending cost more when the story stops working. After mediation failed, my mother stopped pretending. The calls didn't come anymore. Neither did the careful messages or the quiet pressure dressed up as concern. What replaced them was absence, total, deliberate, surgical. At first it felt familiar. Silence had always been one of her tools. She used it the way other people used yelling. Letting it sit. Letting it make you doubt yourself. Letting it do the work for her. But this time something was different. I didn't rush to fill it. A week passed, then another. No contact, no updates, no passive-aggressive holiday photos. It was as if I had been quietly erased, and oddly my body relaxed. I didn't realize how much tension I had been carrying until it wasn't constantly being reactivated. No waiting for the phone to light up. No rehearsing explanations in my head. No bracing myself for the next version of her disappointment. At work, I noticed the change first. I spoke more in meetings. I stopped apologizing for asking questions. I left on time without guilt. My manager commented that I seemed lighter. I almost laughed. The legal process, however, did not slow down. Marjorie called one afternoon and asked me to come in. "They've submitted amended statements," she said. "Your mother is changing her position." "About what?" "About intent," Marjorie replied. "She's now claiming you verbally agreed to let her manage everything indefinitely." I shook my head. That never happened. "I know," Marjorie said, "and there's no proof that it did." "Then why say it?" "Because when facts fail," she said calmly, "people pivot to memory." We reviewed the filings together. The language was careful, but unmistakable. My mother was reframing years of silence as consent, dependence as agreement, my lack of protest as permission. It was strange seeing my life rewritten in legal language. "She's also claiming the money was used equally," Marjorie continued. "That your support of household expenses constituted indirect benefit." I leaned back. "So she's saying I already got my share?" "Yes. And that's false." "Yes." Marjorie folded her hands. "This is where it gets uncomfortable for her. How? We request a full accounting, receipts, transfers, dates. I nodded slowly. That evening, Nathan called. His voice sounded strained. She's asking me to testify, he said. I didn't answer right away. She wants me to say she always intended to make things right, he continued. That you didn't want the money. That you trusted her. And what do you want to say? I asked. Silence. I don't know, he admitted. Because parts of that aren't true. That's your answer, I said gently. He exhaled. If I don't back her, she says I'm choosing you. You're not choosing me, I replied. You're choosing reality. She says you're doing this to punish her. I looked out the window at the street below. Cars moving. People living their lives without this constant negotiation. I didn't file paperwork to punish her, I said. I did it because I needed the truth to stop being optional. He was quiet again. Melissa knows, he said finally. That's good, I replied. She's not happy. I wouldn't expect her to be. Another pause. Then softer, she says if this goes to court, it could affect our plans. Plans change, I said. Integrity doesn't. When the call ended, I sat with the weight of it. Not triumph, not vindication, just clarity. For years, I had been told that protecting my mother meant protecting the family. That exposure would destroy something precious. Now I saw it differently. What we were protecting wasn't family. It was a story. And that story was starting to fail. 2 weeks later, the accounting came in. It wasn't dramatic. No secret offshore accounts, no shocking single purchase, just a pattern. Small renovations, travel, debt consolidation, lifestyle smoothing, comfort. And alongside it, the absence of anything resembling a plan to reimburse me. No separate account. No record of intention. No deferred share. Just usage. Marjorie reviewed it line by line. Then she looked up at me. This is strong, she said. What happens now? I asked. We present it, she replied, and we wait. Waiting used to be unbearable for me. It had always meant helplessness, being on the edge of someone else's decision. This waiting was different. I wasn't frozen, I was steady. During that time, something else happened. I ran into my grandmother at the grocery store. She had always been quiet, peripheral, the kind of person who watched more than she spoke. She looked at me for a long moment before saying my name. You look well, she said. Thank you, I replied. She hesitated. Then your mother is very angry. I nodded. I know. She says you've changed? I smiled slightly. I think I stopped pretending. My grandmother studied me. Your father worried about this, she said softly. I stiffened. About what? About money becoming leverage, she said. He didn't trust your mother with it, but he trusted the system. The words settled slowly. He wanted you protected, she added, in case you were the one who needed distance. I swallowed. Why didn't anyone tell me? She looked away, because silence was easier. We stood there between the cereal aisle and the freezers surrounded by strangers, and something ancient clicked into place. This wasn't new. It had just been waiting. That night, I went home and wrote something down for myself. I am not destroying my family. I am surviving it. A week later, Marjorie called. They're asking to settle, she said. My heart didn't race. On what terms, I asked. Partial repayment, she said. Structured, quiet. I closed my eyes. No, I said. Marjorie didn't sound surprised. I thought you might say that. I don't want quiet, I said. I want correct. There was a pause. Then we proceed, she replied. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not fear. Readiness. Because once a story stops working, all that's left is what actually happened. And I was no longer afraid of that the day the paper spoke louder than she ever had. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early March. The kind of day that still smelled like winter, but hinted at something breaking through underneath. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, but because I didn't want to rush. I had rushed my whole life for other people. This wasn't one of those moments. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood benches polished smooth by decades of quiet waiting, fluorescent lights, a clock that ticked loud enough to be noticed when no one was talking. It felt less dramatic than television made it seem, and more serious for that exact reason. This wasn't a performance space. It was a place where stories were measured against records. My mother arrived 10 minutes late. She always did that when she wanted to signal importance. She wore a soft blue coat and pearls I recognized. I had bought them for her years ago after a promotion I never celebrated properly. She didn't look at me. Nathan came in behind her, his face drawn. He sat a few rows back, not with her, not with me. Exactly where he always landed. In between. When the judge entered, everything stood up. Everything sat down. Everything became procedural. Marjorie spoke first. Calm, precise. She laid out timelines, beneficiary designations, disbursement records. She didn't mention feelings. She didn't mention betrayal. She didn't say my mother's name more than necessary. She let the paper speak. My mother's attorney responded with a story, a careful one, about grief, about chaos after loss, about a widow trying to keep a household afloat, about intent without documentation. I watched the judge's face. It never changed. When my mother was called to speak, she stood slowly gripping the edge of the table for balance. Her voice shook at first. She talked about my father, about fear, about how she never meant to hurt anyone. Then she said something she had said to me 100 times before. I knew Claire would be fine. The room didn't react. The judge looked down at the documents, then up at her. Ms. Mercer, he said evenly. Can you show me where your daughter consented to forfeiting her beneficiary rights? My mother opened her mouth, closed it. No, she said. The word landed hard in the quiet room. He nodded once. Then intent is not the issue here. He spoke for several more minutes, explaining things my body already understood even before my mind fully caught up. Beneficiary designations, fiduciary responsibility, obligation to distribute as written. When he finished, he ruled, not dramatically, not harshly, just clearly. The funds had been improperly withheld. Restitution was ordered, with interest, not punitive, corrective. My mother sat down slowly. Nathan stared at the floor. I felt something move through me, but it wasn't relief. It was finality. Outside the courtroom, my mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were wet but not soft. You could have stopped this, she said. I met her gaze, so could you. She shook her head like she was the one betrayed. You wanted to win. No, I said. I wanted it to stop. She laughed bitterly. Congratulations. Then she walked away, already dialing her phone. Nathan approached me hesitantly. It didn't have to go this far, he said. I looked at him for a long moment. It only feels far because no one ever pushed back before. He swallowed. She's saying you ruined her. I didn't, I replied. I just let the truth catch up. He nodded slowly, like someone finally understanding the cost of neutrality. The transfer of funds took time. Weeks, more paperwork, more confirmations. When the deposit finally appeared in my account, it wasn't a rush of joy. It was quiet. Numbers aligning where they should have been years ago. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't celebrate. I fixed the things I had delayed, paid off a lingering balance, put some aside, hired a financial planner who spoke to me like an adult, not a daughter. I also did something else. I removed my mother from my emergency contact list. That decision felt heavier than the court ruling. A month later, the house transfer went through. Not the way my mother had planned. The title was split. Nathan called me afterward, voice tight. She's furious. I know, I said. She says you took something from her. I thought about the years she had taken my silence, my certainty, my willingness. I took responsibility for myself, I replied. She never owned that. He hesitated. I don't think she'll forgive you. I didn't answer right away. I didn't ask her to, I said finally. Spring came quietly that year. No dramatic shifts, just longer days, softer air. The slow return of things that had been dormant. My mother didn't call. Nathan did occasionally. Short conversations, careful ones. Melissa stopped trying to smooth things over. She started asking real questions. I let them answer themselves. One evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of water and watched the lights come on across the city. Somewhere my mother was telling a version of this story that kept her intact. Somewhere relatives were deciding what they believed. I couldn't control that. What I could control was the space I occupied now. Unapologetic, accurate mine. The revenge wasn't loud. It didn't involve humiliation or triumph. It was the quiet, irreversible shift of power back into my own hands. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough, what power looks like after the noise is gone. The weeks after the ruling were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful in a dramatic way, just still. Like the moment after a storm passes when you're not sure yet what's been damaged, only that the wind has stopped screaming. My mother didn't call. That part I had anticipated. What surprised me was how quickly everyone else adjusted to that silence. No one stepped in to bridge it. No one tried to negotiate my return to normal. The family machine recalibrated without me the way it always had when something stopped being useful. At first, that realization stung. Then it clarified. I had spent years believing my presence was essential, that my absence would cause collapse. Instead, it caused inconvenience, and inconvenience, I learned, is not the same thing as loss. Nathan called less often. When he did, the conversation stayed shallow. Weather, work, wedding plans I was no longer part of. He never brought up the ruling directly, neither did I. One evening, a month after the funds were transferred, he finally asked the question he'd been circling. "Are you okay?" he said. I thought about it, really thought. "Yes," I said, "I am." He was quiet for a moment. "Mom says you've changed." I smiled faintly. "So have you." He didn't argue. The house on Willow Ridge Road sold in early summer. Not because my mother wanted to move, because she had to. The repayment, even structured, had tightened her finances more than she'd expected. Comfort had always depended on access to other people's margins. Now she had to live inside her own. Nathan told me this the way people deliver bad news they're not sure they're supposed to share. "She's downsizing," he said. "That makes sense," I replied. "She thinks you wanted this." I didn't respond. Because wanting fairness is not the same as wanting punishment. But people who confuse control with love can't tell the difference. I didn't attend the wedding. The invitation never came. Instead, I saw photos later. A barn venue, white lights, everyone smiling in that careful public way. My mother stood front and center, radiant, surrounded. She looked unchanged, but I knew better now than to trust appearances. That summer, I took a week off work and went somewhere alone. A small coastal town, nothing glamorous. Just water-long walks and mornings where no one needed anything from me. On the third day, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't replaying conversations in my head. I wasn't drafting responses to things that hadn't been said yet. The silence in my mind had finally matched the silence around me. One afternoon, I sat on a bench overlooking the water and thought about power. Not the kind people imagine when they hear the word, not dominance, not victory. Power, I realized, is choice without fear. The ability to say yes or no without calculating the emotional fallout. The ability to leave a room without explaining yourself. The ability to keep your resources, emotional or otherwise, from being quietly redirected. That was what I had gained. Not money, agency. When I returned home, I made changes that looked small from the outside. I updated my will, removed assumptions, named beneficiaries intentionally. I changed my phone settings. Certain numbers went straight to voicemail. Not blocked, just filtered. I didn't want conflict. I wanted boundaries. At work, I accepted a promotion I would have talked myself out of a year earlier. More responsibility, more visibility, more of my voice in rooms where decisions were made. My manager said, "You seem ready?" I was. In early fall, my grandmother passed away. The call came from my aunt, neutral, informational. I attended the funeral. It was the first time I saw my mother in months. She stood near the front, composed, greeting people with practiced warmth. When she saw me, something flickered across her face, not anger, calculation. She approached me afterward, away from the crowd. "You look well," she said. "So do you," I replied. She waited. I didn't fill the silence. "I never meant for things to end up like this," she said finally. I met her eyes. "I believe you." She exhaled like that was the wrong answer. "You could still make this right," she said. The old version of me would have asked how, would have leaned in, searching for a path back to something familiar. This version didn't. "I already did," I said. Her mouth tightened. "By taking from me." "By stopping the taking," I corrected. She shook her head slowly. "You'll regret this distance." I thought about my apartment, my work, my quiet mornings, my choices. "I don't," I said. She turned away first. At the reception afterward, relatives spoke to me politely, carefully, as if I were a changed equation they hadn't finished solving yet. I left early. On the drive home, I didn't feel sadness. I felt clarity. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Not legally, emotionally. And for the first time, that felt like safety. Revenge stories are supposed to end with fireworks, with comeuppance, with someone begging. This one didn't. It ended with a recalibration so thorough that no one could pretend things were the same. My mother lost control. My brother lost certainty. I lost illusions. And what replaced them was something far more stable. A life where my worth wasn't measured by what I could absorb. A life where love, if it came, would have to come without conditions. That was the real turning point. Not the court ruling, not the money. But the moment I realized I didn't need anyone to see me differently in order to finally see myself clearly. By the time winter came back around, the distance had settled into something permanent. Not dramatic, not announced, just real. My mother and I existed in the same world the way strangers do in a shared city. Aware of each other, no longer intersecting. Occasionally visible at the edges, never close enough to collide. Nathan called once in November. A short call. He asked about work. I asked about his. Neither of us mentioned our mother. When the conversation ended, I noticed something new. I didn't feel the urge to follow up. That had been my role for so long. Maintaining continuity, making sure no thread went completely slack. Without that job, I had more time than I knew what to do with. I used it carefully. I spent Thanksgiving with friends instead of family. Not a replacement gathering, no speeches, no comparisons, just food conversation and a kind of laughter that didn't require explanation. When someone asked about my parents, I answered honestly but briefly. We're not close right now. No one pressed. That alone felt like a luxury. In December, a letter arrived from my mother's attorney. Not threatening, not apologetic, informational. They had complied fully with the ruling. Accounts were closed, transfers completed. There would be no appeal. At the bottom, a line that caught my eye. All matters are considered resolved. I read it twice. Resolved didn't mean healed, it meant finished. And finished was enough. 2 weeks later, my mother sent me a Christmas card. No note inside, just her handwriting on the envelope. Careful, familiar. A signal without a message. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the counter and left it there for days. When I finally did, it was exactly what I expected. A photograph from years ago, all of us smiling, before things had names. I put it back in the envelope and slid it into a drawer. Some memories don't need to be displayed to be acknowledged. In January, something unexpected happened. Nathan asked to meet. We chose a coffee shop halfway between our apartments. Neutral ground, no childhood ghosts. He looked different, thinner, quieter. I'm in therapy, he said after we ordered. I nodded. How is that? He stared at his cup, uncomfortable. That's usually a sign it's working, I said. He laughed weakly. I didn't see it, he said, for a long time. See what? The way she used you, he replied. The way she used both of us differently. I didn't rush to respond. I'm not asking you to forgive her, he continued, or me. What are you asking, I asked. He hesitated. I don't want to lose you completely. I considered that. You didn't lose me, I said. You just don't get access to the version of me that absorbs everything anymore. He nodded slowly. I can live with that. We sat in silence for a moment. It wasn't tense, just honest. I didn't testify against her, he said finally. But I didn't lie either. I know, I replied. How? I read the transcript, I said. He exhaled. She hasn't forgiven me. I'm not surprised. She says I chose wrong. I looked at him. There isn't a right child in a system like that. Only useful ones. That stayed with him. When we parted, I felt something loosen. Not reconciliation, but possibility. That winter, I made another quiet decision. I stopped monitoring the family group chat. I didn't leave it. I just muted it completely. No notifications, no glances, no emotional background noise. I didn't need to announce my exit to exit. Around the same time, my mother tried once more. She showed up at my building again. This time, she didn't ring the bell. She waited outside. I saw her from the window, standing on the sidewalk, hands folded, the picture of restraint. I didn't go down. Not out of spite, out of certainty. I watched her wait. 10 minutes, then 15. Then she walked back to her car. The next day, there was a voicemail. Her voice was calmer than I remembered. I just wanted to know if we could talk, she said. No lawyers, no past, just us. I deleted it without listening again. Because there is no just us when one person refuses to acknowledge what was done. That was the final boundary. Not legal, emotional. And it held. By spring, the story had shifted in ways I couldn't control and no longer tried to. Some relatives believed my mother's version. Others didn't. Most stayed neutral. Life went on. What mattered was this. I stopped explaining myself to people who benefited from misunderstanding me. I stopped translating my boundaries into something more palatable. I stopped confusing distance with cruelty. The hardest lesson wasn't learning how to fight back. It was learning when not to engage at all. Because once you stop participating in a false narrative, it collapses on its own. Silence used correctly becomes a form of truth. And I was finally fluent in it. The last time I thought about my mother before this, it surprised me. Not because I missed her, but because I realized how long it had been since she had occupied the center of my mind. That used to be her permanent address. Every decision ran through her voice first. Every choice filtered through what she would say, what she would need, what she would feel. Even when she wasn't present, she was active. Now she appeared the way old habits do. Briefly, without authority. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. I was standing in line at the pharmacy, half listening to the woman in front of me talk about her grandchildren, when I caught my reflection in the security mirror above the counter. Nothing remarkable. Same face, same posture, but something had changed in my eyes. They were calm, not guarded, not braced, not waiting, just calm. That was when I understood the real ending of this story hadn't been the court ruling, or the transfer of money, or even the distance that followed. It had been the moment I stopped organizing my life around someone else's instability. People often ask what happened after, as if the aftermath must be dramatic to be meaningful. It wasn't. No apologies arrived in the mail, no tearful confessions, no sudden self-awareness on my mother's part. She didn't wake up one day and realize what she had done. She didn't call to admit she was wrong. She didn't ask how to repair things. She simply adjusted. She told a version of the story that let her sleep at night. She leaned harder on people who didn't question her. She avoided spaces where facts might surface again. In other words, she stayed herself, and I stopped trying to save her from that. The most honest thing I can say is this: losing the fantasy of reconciliation hurt more than losing the relationship itself. Because I had spent years believing that if I just explained myself better, stayed kinder, stayed quieter, stayed useful, love would eventually arrive in full. What I didn't understand was that love offered with conditions is not delayed love. It's control. Once that truth settles in, you can't unsee it. Nathan and I settled into something that wasn't closeness, but wasn't hostility either. We spoke on birthdays, occasionally on Sundays. We didn't talk about our mother. We didn't need to. The space between us held that reality without requiring words. He grew into himself slowly. I watched from a distance, not guiding, not correcting, just letting him learn the way I finally had. As for me, life expanded in ways that would have once felt selfish. I bought things without explaining them to anyone. I took a job opportunity that required relocation and said yes without calling home first. I planned holidays based on what I wanted instead of what would keep the peace. Each choice felt small in isolation. Together they rebuilt me. I learned something important during that time. Boundaries don't announce themselves. They don't shout. They don't punish. They simply exist. And people either respect them or reveal themselves trying not to. The revenge, if anyone insists on calling it that, wasn't about watching my mother struggle or seeing her lose status or comfort. It was about removing her ability to decide who I was allowed to be. It was about reclaiming authorship over my own life. That kind of revenge doesn't leave scorch marks. It leaves silence and clarity. I no longer wonder what would have happened if I had stayed quiet. I no longer imagine alternative endings where I swallowed one more injustice and somehow earned fairness in return. Because I know exactly what would have happened. I would have disappeared. Slowly, politely, completely. If you've stayed with this story until now, it's probably because some part of it felt familiar. Maybe not the details, but the shape of it. The way love was always tied to compliance. The way generosity became obligation. The way saying no felt like betrayal. If that's you, hear this clearly. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. You are not ungrateful for questioning arrangements that only work when you stay silent. You are not breaking a family by refusing to carry what was never yours to hold. There is a difference between helping and erasing yourself, between loyalty and submission, between love and control wearing a friendly face. I didn't win by taking anything from anyone. I won by stopping the quiet surrender, by drawing a line and letting the consequences fall where they belonged, by choosing my dignity over being easy to manage. If this story resonated with you, you're not alone. Share your own experience in the comments. Someone scrolling late at night might need to see that setting a boundary doesn't make them heartless. It makes them free. And if you want to hear more stories like this told honestly without gloss or guilt, stay with me. There are more truths worth telling.